All right, welcome. My name is Brenda Versteeg, and I'm happy to have you join us. I'm the Director of Professional Development and Social Justice here in the Levy School of Business, working with our undergraduate program. This is our first panel of the new year for the Peer Career Consulting Program. Our PCCs are senior business majors who help support our undergraduate students, particularly our younger first and second year students, with coaching and mentoring to help them on their way as they select majors and explore internship and career paths. So our PCCs are available to help any student, and certainly at the end of our panel, we'll provide information on how you can reach out via email to our PCCs to set up a time to either meet with them or to have a Zoom conversation with them as well. Tonight's panel is going to be moderated by one of our PCCs, Carlise, and I'll introduce her in just a second. I will say that we will make this panel available to all students and then can also follow up and answer questions that you might have in the future. So let us know if you want a specific question answered, and we'd be happy to follow up with you at that point. So I'm going to turn it over to our senior AIS major, Carlise, who's from Santa Barbara. She'll talk a little bit about who she is and help introduce our wonderful panelists for tonight and get us started. Thanks, Carlise.
Hi everyone, my name's Carlise. As Brenda said, I'm a senior AIS major. I'll be working at Deloitte full-time after graduation, and so I became a PCC to try and help share some of my experiences with other students. Joining me, I have another senior PCC, Karina, and Hilary. I don't know if you guys want to do some brief introductions to start us off.
Yeah, I can go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Karina Kapaghian. I'm a senior finance major and real estate minor. I have interned with PwC for the past 2 summers, and I'll be working in their San Francisco office after graduation.
Awesome. I can go next. Hi, I'm Hilary. I'm a senior finance major with a minor in business analytics and sustainability. I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, and I have had internships both back home and also in the States, and in industries ranging from aviation to financial services.
All right, so also joining us, we have 2 wonderful recruiters, Kaitlyn and Emily. Do you guys want to give us a little bit of background on where you work?
Yes, I can kick it off. Sorry, something popped up on my screen. There's always a tech something going on. But hi, everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Koyama, and I am a talent acquisition manager out of PwC. I'm based out of San Francisco. I've been in San Francisco my whole career and actually started in our tax department. So have gone through a very similar recruiting process to many of you within a school of business as well. But now specifically, I work in campus recruiting, so really working with students to help build relationships with them, faculty on campus, and ultimately help folks determine where they want to go with their career. If that's PwC, great. If not, if it makes sense for industry or another firm, I am that go-to person. But I recruit specifically out of Santa Clara and have been the recruiter for 3 years. So lots of time at SCU and building those relationships with students along the way. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Emily.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Nickolas. I live in San Jose. Born and raised here, and I went to Santa Clara. I graduated in 2020 with my marketing degree, and now I work at Collabera. I am a talent specialist. I started back last May, so in 2021, and yeah, I'm excited to chat with you guys about what it is like from a recruiter's eyes and answer everyone's questions. And yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's start with Kaitlyn, and I'll have both of you kind of just talk about what a recruiter actually does and kind of just what your day-to-day responsibilities are.
Yeah, a little bit of a loaded question. I feel like it always depends on the company. So every recruiter operates slightly differently. However, from my side of the house, pretty much what I do is, like I mentioned before in my intro, helping students determine what role ultimately that they align with. So I do a lot of one-on-ones with students who come to me and say, I'm a 2024 major, I'm thinking about going into information systems. What do I qualify for? So a lot of one-on-ones and career advising that way. I also attend events on campus, whether that be in person or virtually now, staff events too. So making sure we have enough professionals from our client service side being there. Work with faculty to develop curriculum, workshops, different things like that. Every day looks a little bit different, but ultimately being that main point person for a lot of students for the company and being that first line of defense when they have questions come up. And then helping with the review process too. So once you apply, I am the first person your application comes to. So a lot of different things day to day, but ultimately being that point person for students for the company.
All right, on to me. I will answer the same question. So, Kaitlyn, I totally agree with what you're saying, that it's so different because my day looks totally different than that. So, Kaitlyn, I believe in my eyes, I would call you like an in-house recruiter. So you hire for a specific company, while Collabera is a staffing company, or we call ourselves a total talent solutions company. So I work with a lot of different like large tech clients in the Bay Area. Some big ones are like Apple, Google, Facebook, and I help almost like reactive recruiting. So Apple has a relationship with a account manager who's our salespeople. They have a position available as a front-end engineer. And so I go directly to the market on LinkedIn or Monster, and I find that talent. And then I basically get that person hired in that way. So I'm not really like proactively reaching out to people and advising them on, their job hunt, though I do that as well. But for the most part, it's kind of that reactive side of things, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of the sort of the day-to-day, but it's different every day, of course. So yeah.
All right, awesome. Next question, let's start with Emily. How do you find the right recruiter for you, and how do you connect with the right recruiter that kind of relates to your interests?
Great question. So like I kind of just mentioned, is though I'm not necessarily like helping people day to day with like advising them on their next role, I am the one actually reaching out to people. So however, on the other side, I get a lot of messages, being a recruiter, people reaching out to me saying like, hey, I'm a software engineer. I'm graduating from so-and-so place. Do you have any job opportunities available? And I'll hop on a call with them and I'll chat with them about kind of what they're looking for and see if I can match them to any open roles. So I always recommend doing that. It doesn't hurt. I mean, the only thing a recruiter can say is, no, I don't have anything. So definitely you can do that. But like I said, I'm kind of on that reactive side of things. So yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense. But if you are like reaching out to a recruiter on LinkedIn, go with someone that you can relate to in some way. So a previous Bronco, right? Like if anyone at Santa Clara reached out to me and they were looking for a position that I couldn't help them with, I 100% would still talk to them and like try and help them, advise them into a different line of attack. Or also, for me, I work with a lot of positions that are technical. So I hire a lot of engineers, business analysts, technical people. So looking at maybe where a person works, send them a message, connect with them, say, I'm looking for a job. Got anything for me? So yeah, I think those would be kind of my tips from my perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, like Emily mentioned, I'm very much in-house, so very different experience. I love already even just hearing your side. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these other different recruiter roles out there. For me, being at PwC, like I said, I recruit just for PwC. So best way, I think, for us, as well as any like large company, if you already know what company you're interested in, what field you want to go, so if it's a PwC or a Deloitte, or if it's Apple or Google, definitely going on their site and searching Career Center or entry-level jobs, that will probably take you to the best spot of one, to show you what roles are open. Also, we have a campus recruiting map as well as some other companies too, so you can search, find Santa Clara there, and find out directly who that recruiter is. So you already know, hey, I saw you on the map. I'm actually interested in roles. What might you have open? So I think just doing that due diligence of searching for the company and seeing, do they have a specific recruiting page out there? LinkedIn, also great as well, of looking once again too for the company as well as a recruiter. If you know someone at another company or you have a friend who's working there, that's also a great way to say, hey, who did you talk to? So it's less of a cold call or a cold email. Be like, hey, Karina gave me your contact information. Would be great to connect. I'm looking for something later. So definitely, I think, use your other students as resources as well too, because they might already know who to reach out to.
Awesome. Okay, that's great advice. Next question, how can a student prepare for a call with a recruiter? And what do you think are 1 to 2 key questions that they should ask about the job they're applying for? Let's have Kaitlyn start us off.
Yeah, I think one, how do you prepare? Search the website, I think, is always great too. Like, you don't need to ask questions about like, oh, what's your mission statement or anything like that. Number one tip I tell for students is definitely be mindful of the other person's time and ask questions as well. Be mindful of your own time. What do I truly want to learn? Either the recruiter or the professional isn't sitting there with a checklist going, okay, they asked me about the values of the company. They asked you about this. We are here to help you ultimately. So I think in preparing those questions, looking through the site, seeing what jobs might already be open is a great jumping off point. As well too, if you're not really sure, just coming with those questions of, like we mentioned earlier, I'm a 2023 grad who's majoring in accounting. This is a little bit about my background. I'm interested in going into audit or tax or consulting. Can you kind of help me be the next point? So I think as long as you've done that due diligence to show, I've done a little bit of research, I have some questions for you, and they even can be, where do I start? What's my next step? Is totally okay. I think that kind of leads in a little bit to those sample questions, but when you do have a specific job narrowed down, great things, I think, especially in this world, to ask is, what is the, is it hybrid? Is it fully in person? What are you guys as a company like? Awesome question right now. I think for some companies, it could be, if you're hiring for a role that's not going to start in a few months, we could say, we're hybrid right now. We just ask you to be flexible. We're not 100% sure what it's going to look like on your day one. But the format is always great. I think too, if you have any like logistical questions, so things like, oh, I saw that the position is open in San Francisco. I actually sit in San Jose though. I was just wondering, is location something that's super important to you? Kind of going off of that hybrid role, just because a lot of companies now too, you don't have to physically sit in the same city that you're in. So I think looking through location as well too is always a great question to come if you have already narrowed down that role that you're looking at.
Okay, so I feel like something you brought up, Kaitlyn, was about like being mindful of the time on each person's end. So something that I just thought about is a typical screen that I have with a candidate. I target for it to last about 10 to 15 minutes. If it's longer than that, then I mean, I in terms of like what I try and do every day, I try and talk to about like, 7 to 10 people every day. So that does add up, but some people I do want to talk to for longer and stuff like that. So just think about that in the back of your mind. But typically a recruiter, I won't say 100% of the time, but they often like drive the call. So I know exactly the type of questions that I'm going to ask, especially given I mean, in some ways I'm kind of like you're mentioning, Kaitlyn, like sometimes I'm cold calling someone. I'm just like, hey, are you in the job market? I came across your resume on LinkedIn if their phone number is listed, or I sent them a message on LinkedIn and we've set up a time to chat. And a lot of times at that point, they'll know what the position is. So going off that, I mean, treat it kind of like an interview, right? Like be professional, talk about your skills. And in terms of like asking those logistic questions, a big thing I love when people ask me is like, what does the ideal candidate look like for this role? Or what are some of the must-haves that you're looking for? And what are some of the pluses? A typical job description will tell you that too. Like, this is what we need to have, and this is what we would love to have. And then once maybe that recruiter says, yeah, like we're looking for a Java developer with 5 years of experience, and you're like, you can go into that detail of how you have that relevant experience. So I think that would be a big thing. I think you guys also asked about the questions to ask when you're like about the specific job. So if you know what the job is, you can definitely ask more relevant questions. You know, it could be anything about the company that you're curious about. So like if I'm hiring for a position at Apple, or maybe take Meta, for example, they're going through a huge thing right now with the metaverse, right? So people asking questions and sparking interest in that. I think those would all be, I hope that made kind of some sense. That's kind of what I'd say for that initial phone screen with the recruiter.
All right, well, this next question kind of relates to Emily's answer. And this is probably a tricky question, but what would you say is one trait that you look for in a candidate? And we can have Emily start.
Yeah, I know, I guess I kind of did already answer that a little bit. But I think similar to what I mentioned before, I mean, treating a phone screening almost like an interview. If, for example, a recruiter calls you out of the blue, I do that all the time. Like I cold call people that have their phone number listed on LinkedIn. You know, having a sense of like professionalism is really important. Honestly, like I can't stand when someone answers the phone, they're like, send me the job description. I'm like, oh my goodness, like have a little bit more like interest and like, cause I'm a recruiter, I have access to like 10,000 different jobs. So, so I would say professionalism is a big thing. What was the other thing I was gonna say? Communication, I mean, that's just a given sometimes, and a lot of times very dependent upon the role. With communication, that can mean a lot of times, you know, answering a question concisely, right? If the recruiter asks you a question, like it can be nerve-wracking, especially in an interview. But just like take a second and think about what the question is and then give your answer. And then third thing I would probably say is whenever I feel like someone has like the desire to learn, if they don't know maybe what a specific technology is, or they don't have like 5 years of experience and I need that, if I feel like they have an interest to learn, then I will push them directly to the client and explain that to the client and say, hey, this might not be the exact person you're looking for, but I can tell from that phone call that that's like who they are as a human. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. I was like, oh my, now what do I follow up with? I would definitely echo everything that Emily said. I think as well too, like you said, communication skills, that professionalism honestly goes so far. I think even for your personal brand, just even if maybe however you're interacting with that recruiter, maybe that's not the place that you work, but you will remember that one. Like when Darius popped on earlier, not today, I was like, oh my gosh, I met him his freshman year. He was so polished, so on top of it. I was like, I still remember you to this day because of those little things. So I think not even as a recruiter, but just as you're in the networking sessions and chatting with more people, that professionalism, being on top of things really goes a long way. I always tell people to leadership as well is always something we're looking for. So whether that be leading others, so being a part of a group or an organization on campus and being on a committee or things like that is always great, but also how you lead yourself, I think is just as big too. Is like I said, are you a proactive student? Are you organized? Are you driven by your job search? And I think even as you're having conversations, whether that be via email or phone or more formally in an interview, I think all of that really does show, because you can tell when the other person isn't interested or didn't come prepared to a call. I've had calls before that exactly kind of like Emily said, I'm like, oh, hey, like, how are you doing? We'll chit chat. And I'm like, so like, what questions can I answer for you? Knowing I've sent an email ahead of time to them. They're like, I don't really know. I'm like, okay, well, why are we here? So I think any conversations you've had ahead of time as well, really just reading through emails you get from either the Career Center or another company is also a big part of that research. So I think, like I said, definitely echo everything Emily said, but leadership within yourself as well as others is one of the big ones for us.
Perfect. All right, next question. Lots of students are kind of wondering how to get past automated resume reviews and how to get their resume into somebody's hands. So are there any best practices that you could recommend for making sure that your resume is actually getting read by someone and that it stands out? And we can have Kaitlyn start.
Yeah, I didn't even know this software was a thing. A student told me about it actually last week. So personally for me, we don't have that software. So I read every single resume of every single person who applies. But I think as well too, just ways to stand out on your resume, very similar, being organized on it. You want no spelling errors. You want it to look professional, I think is one of the biggest things. Taking time to go through, make sure the margins are lined up, make sure there's no spelling errors. And the one tip I always tell students is in your descriptions. So whether that be for prior jobs or clubs you're involved in, pretty much those 2 to 3 bullet points are really the meat and bones of your resume. So making sure that those statements are impactful, that they make sense, they're descriptive, and really using awesome action verbs there. I know there's lots of, like I say, you plug in the Career Center, best place to go, as well as any of your peer leaders as well too, to have a second set of eyes on that. But I think those 3 bullet points for those statements describing what you've previously worked on or projects like that are really, really the big parts.
I love all that, Kaitlyn. Yes. So Carly, I have a question. So you're asking about you're talking about like if I, for example, apply to a job on LinkedIn and it like there's like the resumes, some of them get like trashed because they might not have something in it. Is that what you mean by that? There's like I don't know what's this, because I know we don't have something like that, but I pulled from like LinkedIn. Is that what you mean? I don't know if that made any sense. Sorry.
Yeah, you could talk about that or just general resume tips or kind of
what
catches your eye when you're looking through all of these different resumes.
Okay, cool. So when I first saw this question that you guys were going to ask, I was like, keywords. So the way that I pull a resume is, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys like go to the library and are trying to like pull up a specific research paper, and you go to the library's website and you can type in what's called a Boolean string. And that's like, let's say I'm looking for a business analyst. So I type this into LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn recruiter account. So I type in business analyst and let's say I want these technologies of like Java or Python or blank, and then something else. And so all that's doing is that's pulling keywords out of your resume. And that's the resume that's going to show up on my screen. And I think this might be like an unpopular opinion sometimes with the length of resumes. I don't mind if it's longer than a page long. In fact, I would rather there be more information than not, as long as you can speak about all of it and it's not like a lie. That's how your resume is going to actually make it through these automated systems where it's like, the way that I think those systems work is there's a job description that they have, right? And if you don't have the keywords that are in that job description, they're not going to want to like pull your resume out. So thinking about different ways that you can write, like if you're a marketing analyst, tell me like everything that you did on your resume, like put that in there. It might seem a little bit much, so don't make it too wordy, but put those keywords like technologies sometimes, right? If you used like Zendesk as a ticketing system, put that in there in your skills. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say. Keywords, keywords, keywords. Another thing I would say is I like seeing resumes that have a summary at the top. It really helps me because when I send a resume that I basically want to submit to a client, I send that to my account manager, who then sends it to the client, and I include a little summary of the person's experience. And a lot of times, like, I can't remember half the things that we talked about, and having that summary at the top of their resume helps me think about, okay, they have 5 years of experience as a business analyst. You know, having that, even I would recommend having it be like, you know, 5 sentences, just a little paragraph about who you are. And same what Kaitlyn said, honestly, just make sure it's clean. Personally, I don't like really like pretty like designs on the resume. Like, just send me a Word document of just the words, and that's really all I want to see, because I reformat most resumes that I send to a client. I basically have to convert it to a Word doc, and I just make it very boring and clean. So those are just some random things I would say. I'm sure, Kaitlyn, you can speak about this. Like, we probably look at like 50 to 100 resumes a day in my job. So it gets a little bit exhausting sometimes. So having it pull out with the keywords is the best thing. So I hope that made kind of some sense.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, so last question for you two. How would you want candidates to follow up with you, maybe post-interview, post-screen, and maybe when? Kind of what the time frame is that you would like for candidates to follow up. Let's start with Emily.
Okay, let's think. So typically, I mean, the recruiter should mostly be following up. If they don't follow up, it might not mean the best thing. But I personally, it might just be a personal opinion, but I love when people follow up with me, because half the time things get lost in my inbox or in my messages. It fell off my to-do list. So I know a lot of candidates, like, even if they don't get the job or they don't make it past the screening, like, they still want to know if it's a yes or a no. And I think that's important to share with them. So don't hesitate to follow up. It really doesn't bother me at all. So, you know, after a phone screen with me, if you don't hear from me within, like, you know, a couple days, definitely ask. And then after an interview, it's different. It very much is dependent upon, we're always waiting for feedback from the actual company. So sometimes Apple might take like a week because they're hiring, interviewing other people. But I always try and keep the candidate updated on that. So I guess I'd answer that with don't hesitate to follow up. It will not bother me at all.
Yeah, I think it depends on when you're following up. So after I host an event, I do sometimes get notes from students who are like, oh, thanks so much for the event. I actually had some additional questions. Can we set up a time? So I think if you have certain questions, feel free, send those right away after an event, or if you had a one-on-one with them, just thanking that person for their time. I feel like those come a little more few and far between than they used to, but it is always very nice. Kind of warms your heart to be like, oh, thanks for sending that follow-up note. Like, it is nice. I think, kind of like Emily mentioned, as far as interviews, I would say we always, at least PwC or a certain company, if you look on their site for us, after you apply, we let you know, because we have an application deadline, like, hey, you'll hear back about a week after the deadline with us. After you interview, same thing, you'll hear back in about a week. But if you are just following up, I think just in general as a thank you or a courtesy, feel free to just do it right after your interview wraps up. You can always ask your interviewers for their contact information to send that quick little note. Like we said, it's not required. It is always kind of nice though when you get it in your inbox. And two, it sets you apart from other candidates, I think. But yeah, at any point in that. But usually I think for like my company, we will tell you like, hey, you'll hear back in about a week. So you should hear back regardless. I'd say if it's any later than when they told you, feel free to shoot them an email. But for me too, email I think is always the best point of communication for me. I actually shamefully am not on LinkedIn too often. I check in probably like once a week and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry I didn't respond. But email is usually, I think, a lot of folks' preferred method of communication right now, but never hurts to ask either too, when you're asking, hey, can I send you a follow-up note? Like, would you prefer for me to call you, or would you prefer me just to send you an email? Never hurts to ask either.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Kaitlyn. We are going to switch gears and ask a couple questions of our PCCs. So first one, what are 1 to 2 things that both of you have done to stand out to a recruiter? We can start with Karina.
So yeah, I would love to answer this question, but I first just want to talk about my experience with recruiters. And just I know as a underclassmen, I know it can be intimidating to at first approach a recruiter, but as Kaitlyn and Emily mentioned, they're there to help and talk with you. And I think my advice when approaching them is to kind of Google what their company does beforehand, so you can save time on both sides, not saying, oh, like, what do you do? Like, you know, ahead of time what they're doing, like, are you interested in it? And also ask if they have any upcoming open internships that are related to your major, as well as having a well-formatted and, at least when it was in person, a printed resume that you can leave with them after talking to them. And try to ask like what qualities they're looking for, and like just network as much as possible. But the 1 to 2 things that I think I did to stand out is, like I said, I think having a printed resume on hand helps candidates stand out rather than just talking to the recruiter, whether it's like in Lucas or at a career fair, then just walking away. So the recruiter can now put a face to a name, just merely submitting it online. As well as if you're interested in a company, maybe search up what alums have worked there and try to network with them and see if they can put you in contact with like a certain recruiter. Like Kaitlyn mentioned, like sometimes there's specific like campus recruiters that may be better suited to like talk to you about like what you want, or like
Yeah, I think Karina touched on some really good points in the early stage of recruitment. So I can talk more about in the later process. And essentially, I think an internship is more of a extended interview process that shows like your ability and how well you fit into the company. I think my experience were more like fit into my scenario specifically. Nonetheless, I'm very happy to share. So due to COVID and the time difference, I actually had to do my interview at 3 a.m. in the morning. Kind of mentioned it in the interview. And I think that's what's kind of stuck with the recruiter, because no one really interviews in the middle of the night, I believe. So I think that's a unique selling point, something that is very unique to your situation. And during the internship, I had weekly meetings with my recruiter. I remember I had a presentation on finance-related materials, which my recruiter might be less familiar with. So I sent up with follow-up materials for her to read on. So I think, you know, having something that she can read more on can allow her to remind of me. In addition, you can also be very personable if there's something that's exciting happening for a recruiter. For example, they're expecting an addition of a family member or getting a promotion. You can always send them an email to congratulate them. I think everyone likes to feel that others are thinking of them. Just like Kaitlyn has said, to send a follow-up email, for example. It really adds a more personal touch to your relationships. So I think being personable and showing your uniqueness would definitely help myself or everyone to stand out during a job experience.
Perfect. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much to Kaitlyn and Emily for joining us. Thank you, Karina and Hilary, for also taking the time to be here. Thank you to Brenda and Casey for setting all of this up and making it work so well. Yeah, so I think Brenda can take us out with some ways to contact the PCCs if you have any further questions.
Thanks, Carlise. We'll do just that. Casey's going to share a slide with information on how to contact the peer career consultants if you'd like to set up an appointment or if you have a question you'd like them to address. So Casey, I'll have you share that now and take a look at that. And if you'd like us to follow up with you, please take a screenshot of the QR code, and it'll take you to a form, and we can actually answer specific questions that you might have. On the bottom of the screen, there's the careerconsultant@scu.edu email. So we'll leave that up for another second, and then we'll wish you a very good evening. Thanks, everybody.